the 7 greatest traitors in all of human history. They smiled, shook hands, then destroyed everything. Every betrayal in history begins the same way, with trust. A handshake, a kiss on the cheek, a letter of loyalty, a shared meal. And then, a knife in the back so precise, so perfectly timed, that the entire world changed direction in a single moment. These are not the villains who announced themselves. They didn't wear black. They didn't sneer from the shadows. They were generals who led armies, disciples who prayed, heroes who bled for the very cause they would later destroy. That is what makes them terrifying. That is what makes them unforgettable. These are the 7 greatest traitors in all of human history. And when you hear what they did and why, you will never look at the word loyalty the same way again. Number 7. Ephialtes of Trachis, the man whose name literally means nightmare. The year is 480 BC. Persia, the most powerful empire on earth, has launched a campaign to swallow Greece whole. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers under King Xerxes I are marching south, and there's only one thing standing between them and total domination: a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae. The Hot Gates. 300 Spartans, 7,000 Greeks, against an army that blotted out the sky. And for 2 full days, the impossible happened. The narrow pass neutralized Persia's numbers. The Greeks held. Xerxes threw wave after wave of his best soldiers, the immortals, his most feared warriors, and they broke against the Spartan wall like water on stone. King Leonidas and his men were not just surviving, they were winning. And then one man walked into the Persian camp and changed everything. His name was Ephialtes, a local Greek from the very region he was about to destroy. He knew these mountains, every trail, every hollow, every secret path carved into the rock over centuries. And he offered Xerxes the one thing the entire Persian army could not find on its own: a way around. The Anopeia Path, a hidden mountain route that wrapped behind the Greek position and emerged directly at their backs. In exchange for a reward, for money and the promise of Persian favor, Ephialtes walked enemy soldiers through the darkness and placed a knife at the throat of Western civilization. When Leonidas received word that the Persians were flanking his position, he dismissed most of the Greek army, sent them to safety, and then he stayed behind with his 300 Spartans and a few hundred volunteers, knowing exactly what was coming. They ate their last meal. According to legend, Leonidas told them, "Have a hearty breakfast, for tonight we dine in Hades." They fought until they were surrounded on all sides, fought until their spears were broken, fought with swords, fought with their bare hands. Every single one of them died. Ephialtes eventually became so reviled that the Greeks placed a bounty on his head. He was hunted and killed years later, not by Persians, not by soldiers, but by his own countrymen who never forgave him. His name became the Greek word for nightmare. It still is. Number 6. Mir Jafar, the man who sold an entire subcontinent. In 175-7, the Nawab of Bengal, Siraj-ud-Dawla, commanded one of the wealthiest and most powerful regions in the world. Bengal controlled silk, cotton, saltpeter, grain. Its capital, Murshidabad, was said to be richer than London. The British East India Company had a foothold in India, but only barely. They were merchants with soldiers, not conquerors, not yet. What the British could not take by force, they decided to take by arrangement. Mir Jafar was the commander of the Nawab's army, his own brother-in-law, a man trusted with the defense of everything, and the British came to him quietly, in private, and made him an offer: betray the Nawab on the battlefield, and they would make Mir Jafar the new Nawab of Bengal. He said yes. The Battle of Plassey, June 23, 1757. The Nawab's forces numbered nearly 50,000. By every military calculation, this should not have been close. Mir Jafar marched his division to the field and stopped. He held his forces back while the rest of the Nawab's army was cut to pieces. A decisive battle that should have ended British ambitions in India forever was over in hours. The Nawab fled, was captured, and was executed 3 days later. Mir Jafar became Nawab. The British became rulers of Bengal, and Bengal became the beachhead for the colonization of an entire subcontinent. 200 years of British rule in India can be traced back to one man who held his soldiers in place on a June afternoon and waited for the side he was supposed to destroy to win. In South Asia, his name still means betrayer. In Bengali, calling someone a Mir Jafar is one of the worst things you can say about a human being. Number 5. Vidkun Quisling, the man whose name became a word. There are very few traitors in history so complete, so thorough, so total in their betrayal that their name enters the dictionary. Vidkun Quisling is one of them. He was a Norwegian military officer and politician. Educated, ambitious, deeply nationalistic in a way that had twisted into something dark. When Nazi Germany invaded Norway on April 9, 1940, most Norwegians were in shock. The government fled. The resistance began to organize, and Vidkun Quisling went on the radio. That same day, the same day his country was being invaded, he announced that he was taking power, that he was the new head of government, that Norwegians should stop resisting and cooperate with the occupation. He didn't wait to be asked. He didn't wait to be forced. He simply declared himself the leader of a country that was bleeding and offered his people to the men who were doing the bleeding. The Germans didn't even want him at first. They had their own plans, but Quisling made himself useful, and for 5 years he ran Norway as a puppet state, helping deport Norwegian Jews to German concentration camps, dismantling democratic institutions, ordering the arrest of resistors. When Germany fell in 1945, Quisling was arrested, tried for treason, and executed by firing squad. His last words included an insistence that history would vindicate him. It has not. Within months of his death, the word Quisling had entered the English language as a noun, meaning a traitor who collaborates with an enemy occupier. It is still in the dictionary today. A man so thoroughly associated with betrayal that his name no longer belongs to him. It belongs to every coward who ever opened a gate from the inside. Number 4. Benedict Arnold, the hero who burned his own legend. Here is what they don't tell you about Benedict Arnold. Before he was a traitor, he was arguably the most brilliant battlefield commander in the American Revolution. He led an audacious winter march through the Maine wilderness to attack Quebec, nearly 700 miles of brutal terrain in conditions that killed men by the dozens. He single-handedly orchestrated the naval resistance on Lake Champlain that delayed a British invasion from Canada by an entire year. At the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, the turning point of the entire war, it was Arnold's suicidal charge into the British lines that broke the enemy's position and secured the victory that brought France into the conflict on America's side. George Washington called him one of his most valuable officers, and he threw all of it away. The reasons were real. He had been passed over for promotions he deserved. Junior officers were elevated over him. Congress investigated him for misconduct charges he considered absurd. He felt used, discarded, invisible, a man who had given everything and received resentment in return. By 1779, he was in secret communication with British intelligence. By 1780, he had secured command of the critical fortress at West Point, New York, and was systematically dismantling its defenses from the inside, weakening the fortifications, reducing supplies, preparing to hand the most strategic position in America to the British for £20,000. On September 25, 1780, as George Washington himself arrived at West Point for an inspection, Arnold received word that his British contact, Major John Andre, had been captured. Andre had the plans in his boot. Everything was unraveling. Arnold literally ran to the Hudson River, commandeered his own barge, and fled to a British warship, while Washington sat down to breakfast, just hours behind him. Washington's reported reaction when he learned the truth has been recorded as one of the most devastated moments of his command. He is said to have said, quietly, "Arnold has betrayed us. Whom can we trust now?" Benedict Arnold spent the rest of his life in England and Canada, rejected by the British who never fully trusted a man who had already proven he could switch sides, despised by the Americans he had nearly destroyed. He died in London in 1801, largely forgotten, largely alone. His name became a synonym for traitors so permanent that 2.5 centuries later, in America, it still is. Number 3, Marcus Junius Brutus, the betrayal that shook Rome. Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in the world. He had conquered Gaul, crossed the Rubicon, survived civil war, and made himself dictator of Rome. His enemies had tried to stop him and failed. His rivals had underestimated him and paid for it. But there was one man Caesar did not fear, one man he trusted completely, one man he had personally protected, promoted, and loved like a son. Marcus Junius Brutus. Brutus was a senator, a philosopher, a man of principle who had built his entire identity around Roman virtue, Roman honor, Roman Republican ideals. When a group of senators began conspiring to assassinate Caesar, convinced that his growing power was killing the Republic, they came to Brutus because they knew that without Brutus, the murder was just murder. With Brutus, it was justice. On the Ides of March 1544 BC, Julius Caesar walked into the theater of Pompey for a session of the Senate. He had been warned. His wife Calpurnia had begged him not to go, disturbed by terrible dreams. Soothsayers had cautioned him. The omens were everywhere. Caesar walked in anyway, because Brutus had assured him there was nothing to fear. 23 senators surrounded him. The first blow came from behind. Caesar reached for it, confused. And then the daggers came from everywhere, above, below, left, right. He pulled his toga over his face, tradition says, so his enemies would not see him fall undignified. And then he saw Brutus. Et tu, Brutus? Even you, Brutus? Shakespeare put the words in his mouth, but the sentiment was recorded by historians, that Caesar, more than the 23 blades, was undone by the face of the man he had loved and trusted above all others. He stopped fighting. He died of 23 stab wounds, wrapped in his toga, at the feet of a statue of Pompey. The Republic Brutus killed Caesar to save did not survive. The assassination triggered civil wars that ended the Roman Republic forever and gave rise to the Roman Empire. Brutus took his own life 2 years later after losing the Battle of Philippi. He wanted to save Rome. He destroyed it instead. Number 2, Robert Hanssen, the spy who fooled America for 25 years. Most traitors in history operated in wars, in courts, in ancient empires. Robert Hanssen operated inside an office building in Washington, D.C. He wore a badge. He filed paperwork. He was, for 2.5 decades, a senior agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And he was the most damaging spy in American history. Hanssen began passing classified information to Soviet intelligence in 1979. He was methodical, paranoid, brilliant, and utterly invisible. He never met his handlers face to face. He communicated through dead drops, leaving packages under a footbridge in a Virginia park, picking up cash and diamonds in return. He never told the Soviets his real name. He was known only as Ramon Garcia. Over 25 years, he gave them everything. The identities of Soviet double agents working for the United States, at least 3 of whom were executed as a result. The location of a secret underground tunnel the FBI had dug beneath the Soviet embassy in Washington. The technical details of American nuclear war planning. The evacuation procedures for the U.S. government in the event of nuclear attack. He compromised virtually every major U.S. intelligence program for an entire generation. The CIA, the NSA, military operations, sources, methods, names. The KGB and its successor, the SVR, paid him approximately $1.4 million in cash and diamonds over his career. He was never caught through surveillance or investigation. The FBI didn't break his encryption or intercept his communications. They caught him only because they bribed a former Russian intelligence officer to steal his file from the SVR's own archives. When they arrested him on February 18, 2001, at the footbridge where he had just left another dead drop, Hanssen reportedly said to the arresting agents, "What took you so long?" He died in prison in 2023. The full extent of the damage he caused may never be known. Number 1. Judas Iscariot, the name that outlived every empire. Every other name on this list is a historical fact. This one is something more. This one is woven into the language of 2 billion people. This one became a word before words were even being cataloged. Betrayal itself, in the Western world, carries a face. And that face belongs to Judas. For 3 years, Judas Iscariot walked with Jesus of Nazareth. He was not a stranger, not a servant, not a peripheral figure. He was one of 12, chosen, trusted, appointed as the treasurer of the group. He heard the Sermon on the Mount. He watched water become wine. He saw the lame walk and the blind see. He was at the table at the Last Supper, dipping his bread in the same bowl. And sometime during that final meal, he slipped out into the night to complete an arrangement he had already made. 30 pieces of silver, the price of a slave, under Mosaic law. That is what the chief priests paid Judas for the location of Jesus, and a signal to identify him in a crowd. The signal Judas chose was the most intimate gesture in the ancient world. A kiss, a greeting between friends, a sign of affection. In the Garden of Gethsemane, in the darkness, Judas walked up to Jesus and kissed him on the cheek, and the soldiers arrested him. What makes Judas number 1 on this list is not the mechanics of the act. It is the scale of its consequence. The crucifixion that followed, believed by Christians to be the sacrifice that changed the nature of humanity's relationship with God, was set in motion by that kiss. 2,000 years of theology, civilization, art, war, empire, mercy, and meaning traced back to a man who walked through a garden at night and pressed his lips to a friend's face. The Gospels say Judas threw the 30 silver coins back into the temple when he understood what his betrayal had led to. "I have sinned," he said, "by betraying innocent blood." The priests told him that was his problem. He went out and hanged himself. For 2 millennia, historians and theologians have debated Judas. Was he motivated by greed? By disillusionment? Did he expect Jesus to call down angels? To resist? To trigger a revolution that never came? Was he a pawn? Was he a villain? Was he the most tragic figure in all of Scripture? The man whose sin was necessary and whose guilt was unsurvivable? None of those questions have been settled. They probably never will be. What has been settled is this: his name has outlasted Rome. It has outlasted the temple. It has outlasted every empire that has risen and fallen in the 2,000 years since that night in the garden. Every language that has a word for traitor has a word for Judas. Because some betrayals don't just end a life, they change the world. 7 traitors, 7 moments when a single human decision, made in secret, made for money or power or wounded pride or broken belief, redirected the course of history. Ephialtes sold a mountain pass. Mir Jafar held his army still. Quisling announced himself on the radio. Arnold ran for a British ship. Brutus raised a dagger in the name of honor. Hanssen left packages under a footbridge for 25 years. And Judas kissed a man in a garden. None of them did it with a roar. They all did it with a whisper. That is the lesson history has been trying to teach us for 3,000 years, and we keep refusing to learn it. The most dangerous person in any story is never the enemy at the gate. It is always the friend who knows the way in.